You walk into the room and their eyes meet yours. They smile. It looks warm, kind even, like something that belongs in a greeting card. But somewhere in the back of your mind, a small alarm flickers. Not loud, just a whisper. You don't know why, but something feels off, like hearing your name in a tone that's just a few notes too flat, like a hug that lingers a second too long or not long enough. You try to shake it off. Maybe you're being sensitive, maybe you're tired, maybe you're projecting. But here's the thing. People don't need knives to cut you. Sometimes they just need a smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. Have you ever had a moment of happiness and shared it with someone close, only to feel a cold breeze pass through the room? They say the right words, of course. That's amazing. So happy for you. You've earned it. But their tone is smooth like glass and just as breakable. Their eyes flicker to the side, they change the subject, and you start to wonder if you imagined all of it, again. This is not paranoia, it's not drama, it's pattern recognition. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let the outside world blur for a while. This moment is just for you and the truths we're about to unfold. It starts small. They forget to like your post. They skip your celebration but never miss a crisis. When you cry, they show up. When you shine, they disappear. It's almost noble how faithfully they're there for your pain, almost. But even noble shadows can dim your light. Historians still argue whether Julius Caesar truly ignored the warnings of the Ides of March, or if he simply didn't want to believe that betrayal could wear such familiar faces. The tragedy wasn't the knife, it was who held it, and who smiled before doing it. In modern offices, this kind of cold praise is practically an Olympic sport. A coworker claps the loudest in meetings but conveniently forgets to forward your name in an email thread. A manager praises your team effort but never says your name aloud. You're visible until you're not. You try to tell a friend about this pattern and they tell you to let it go, to be grateful, that at least they said something nice. You nod, you try, but inside it still itches. Because your gut, your ancient, survival-wired intuition knows the truth. Something in that applause was hollow, something in their voice was too smooth. People love to be near your flame, until it gets bright enough to show their shadows. Even in childhood, this lesson is passed down quietly. The gifted child learns early not to outshine siblings. The quiet student sees how teachers favor charm over merit. The sensitive kid learns that saying, "that hurt me," gets laughed off. So you internalize it. You start smiling through it. You become fluent in the language of emotional discomfort and learn to ignore your own accent. Here's a quirky tidbit. In ancient China, emperors kept praise singers, officials whose sole job was to compliment the ruler creatively each day. But over time, these compliments became predictable, performative, and completely devoid of meaning. The emperor still got his praise, but the sincerity had vanished. Sound familiar? Your relationships may not have courtiers, but they have performers. People who praise on cue, whose words are shaped more by what's expected than what's felt. They've rehearsed their lines, but their body forgets to act along. The smile doesn't lift their cheeks. Their tone is stuck in neutral. They clap a half beat late, and deep down your nervous system logs every frame. It's like being hugged by a mannequin. Technically correct, completely lifeless. Carl Jung said the unconscious always speaks through the body. That truth isn't just poetic, it's neurological. When someone secretly resents you, their parasympathetic nervous system reacts in microsignals. Tiny betrayals their face can't hide. The lips tighten, the shoulders lift slightly, the eyes avoid yours. And if you say something truly joyful, something big and personal and full of risk, you'll notice they almost flinch. You weren't imagining it. They didn't want to hear it. And the cruel irony, you still want to share things with them. You still crave their joy. You still hope that this time they'll light up for you. So you try again and again and again. But with every small rejection, your heart takes a note, until eventually you stop telling them things entirely. You shrink your news, you dull your joy, you edit your light, just so you don't feel that coldness anymore. Some might call this emotional intelligence. Others call it survival. But either way, it's how people slowly learn to dim themselves in the presence of those they love. Not because love was missing, but because it came with conditions. And so you carry around a kind of sadness that's hard to name. You're not heartbroken, you're not angry, but you're tired. Tired of pretending not to notice that something is off. Tired of filtering your joy to fit someone else's comfort zone. Tired of wondering if you're crazy, or if they are just that good at hiding it. But let's be clear, you're not too sensitive. You're just tired of pretending you don't notice the static behind their smile. You're sitting across from them, laughing, sort of. The joke was technically funny. The timing, the delivery, even the facial expression, all on point. But somehow you're the only one who didn't laugh from the stomach. Because what they said wasn't just funny, it was sharp. The kind of sharp that knows exactly where to land. The kind of sharp that's been watching you quietly for years. You brush it off. Again, that was a bit harsh, but they didn't mean it, probably. You're just overthinking, right? But later, alone, that joke plays on a loop in your head like a song you hate but can't stop humming. The punchline wasn't about something random. It was about your weight, your failure. That thing you told them in confidence when you were raw and trusting and very, very human. Sarcasm is the favorite language of those who want to hurt without getting caught. It's plausible deniability with a giggle. And the worst part? If you call it out, you become the problem. Can't you take a joke? That's the trap. The line between humor and harm becomes invisible, and you become the one who needs to chill. You've seen it before, at family dinners, office parties, group chats. The one who makes everyone laugh often hides behind the defense of just kidding, while slowly chipping away at someone's sense of safety. Sarcasm like that is never random. It's chosen, crafted, a scalpel disguised as a spoon. Historians still debate whether Roman philosopher Seneca truly detested laughter in the Senate because it undermined respect, or because it was often weaponized to mask cruelty. But even in ancient times, people understood that laughter could wound deeper than insults. There's an art to the cruel joke. It needs an audience. It needs timing. And it needs a subject who can't afford to walk away. That's why these moments happen in public. You're less likely to push back with a room full of polite chuckles surrounding you. You smile, you say "good one," and later, you question your dignity in the mirror. Ever heard of the complisult? It's an insult wrapped in a compliment. You're so brave to wear that. You've come a long way, considering where you started. They're verbal landmines. You only realize it exploded after the smoke clears. In psychology, this kind of behavior is often masked as low-level emotional abuse. It doesn't scream, it whispers, and the damage it does isn't immediate, it's cumulative. You don't bleed from a single jab, but thousands, they bruise you in places no one sees. Carl Jung believed that people who can't own their inner chaos often project it. Instead of facing their insecurities, they joke about yours. They mock what you're afraid of. They chip away at what you're still healing, because it's easier to poke a wound in someone else than to sit quietly with your own. It's easier to play the funny friend than admit you're envious, lonely, or stuck. And here's the tricky part. You still want to believe they mean well. You still crave that one moment of realness when the joke drops and they say, "Hey, I'm proud of you." But what you get instead is a slow erosion. Your confidence thinning like paper left out in the rain. And the rest of the world, they don't see it. To them, it's just banter, fun. You two have such a playful friendship. But behind the laughs, you're the one swallowing discomfort. You're the one deciphering the tone, the context, the timing. It's like emotional Sudoku. And every time you try to solve it, the numbers change. You start adjusting yourself. You stop sharing certain topics. You try to joke-proof your life, which is exhausting because eventually, even your silence gets turned into punchlines. You learn to laugh quicker, louder, harder, so no one notices you're hurt. You become a character in their sitcom, scripted for the audience, but aching behind the scenes. There's a moment when you realize you don't laugh around them anymore. You perform. One quirky historical detail. In 18th century France, noble courts would sometimes hire mock jesters, people paid to gently insult aristocrats as a form of social critique. But when the jokes hit too hard, the jesters would be banished. Even then, people could sense the line. Today, the same thing happens, but no one gets banished. They just get blocked, or worse, tolerated forever. You might ask, why do they do it? The answer isn't simple, but often it's rooted in power. Making others laugh at your expense gives them control. It elevates them, even if momentarily. They feel clever, sharp, admired, and if you flinch, that's just more material for next time. But you're not overreacting. You're finally reacting. You're noticing that the friend who claims to love you keeps handing you barbed wire with a wink. Jokes should bring people closer, not make someone shrink into themselves. And yet you keep forgiving, you keep hoping, you think maybe this time it'll be different. But patterns don't lie. If their humor always cuts in the same place, it's not an accident, it's precision. So the next time you hear "you're too sensitive," hear what they're really saying. "I'm too careless to be kind." And if you find yourself laughing out of fear, tension, or habit, pause. Because your laughter should never come at the cost of your self-worth. Remember that smile that felt like static? This is the sound that came with it. They say it was just bad timing, a scheduling issue, a misunderstanding. They meant to be there, but something came up. Again, you nod, you forgive. You've been told to be understanding. People are busy, life is hectic. But somehow, their absence always lands on the days that matter most. When you're launching something, when you're scared, when you're proud, when you need not help, but presence. It's not the big betrayals that shape you. It's the quiet ones, the forgotten calls, the birthday they missed, the job interview they never asked about, the promotion they never celebrated, and the soft apologies that feel like band-aids over something much deeper. You tell yourself it's nothing, but your body disagrees. Your stomach tightens, your throat closes just slightly when their name pops up. Not out of hate, just the slow grief of unmet expectations. Historians still debate whether Cleopatra truly trusted Mark Antony in her final days, or whether she already saw the unraveling but chose to walk with him anyway. Sometimes we stay close to those who failed us, not because we don't see it, but because we hope they'll stop. You share your dreams, they call them unrealistic. You express doubts, they answer with a shrug. You say, "I'm thinking of trying something new," and their face twitches. A smile, just a little too slow to appear. Support is not the same as tolerance. Presence is not the same as care. Subtle sabotage is the most polite form of sabotage. It never yells. It never leaves evidence. It sounds like "I forgot," or "I thought it was next week," or "Sorry, I was dealing with something too." You hear their voice, but their absence is louder, and you start making excuses for them in your head before they even speak. You know the script by heart. You've memorized their reasons. You say to yourself, "They didn't mean to let me down," but you still carry the letdown. Over time, you stop inviting them to things. You stop telling them what you're excited about. You stop reaching out, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. There's a kind of fatigue that comes from consistently expecting a presence that never shows up. It's emotional jet lag. You keep waiting for them to land, but they never arrive. One fringe theory in psychology suggests that some people forget strategically, not out of malice, but out of discomfort. They subconsciously avoid your milestones because those moments remind them of their own stagnation. You're moving forward. They feel stuck. So they vanish, not entirely, just enough to keep their guilt manageable. They won't miss your pain. Pain makes people feel useful, but your progress, that's harder to clap for. You might notice they show up when you're struggling, when you're heartbroken, when you're doubting yourself, and that kindness feels genuine, because in those moments, you're smaller, less threatening, more like the version of you they're comfortable with. Carl Jung warned about this imbalance. He wrote that those who cannot rise themselves often pull others down, subtly, gently, through discouragement disguised as love. It's not always intentional, but it is always destructive. So you shrink, a little at a time. You downplay your hopes so they won't feel uncomfortable. You second-guess your goals because their silence echoes louder than advice. You begin to seek validation elsewhere, but even then, you hear their voice in your head. You start thinking maybe you are too ambitious, too dreamy, too much. This is not humility. This is erosion. Have you ever had someone give you advice that made everything worse, but they smiled while saying it? That's sabotage dressed as support. You're sure you want to do that? Is that really a good idea right now? Maybe you should wait a little. It sounds like concern. It feels like control. They don't want to see you fall, but they don't really want to see you fly either. And the worst part, if you confront them, they'll say, I was only trying to help. But help without accountability is still harm. Here's a quirky fact. In 1950s Soviet Russia, an internal psychological warfare tactic called zersetting was used, not through violence, but through subtle sabotage, disrupting routines, spreading minor misinformation, delaying small events. The goal wasn't immediate destruction, it was gradual unraveling. And it worked. You may not live in a Cold War, but emotional zersetting is real. It shows up in the missed text, the advice that pushed you off track, the cheer that never came, the apology that's always implied but never actually spoken. Eventually you stop blaming them, you start blaming yourself. You tell yourself maybe you expect too much, maybe you're too needy. But needing someone isn't weakness, it's human. And being met with silence in your most important moments, that's not maturity, that's a pattern. Carl Jung also said that loneliness doesn't come from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who make you feel unseen. Let that sink in, because if the person you count on the most only ever shows up when you're broken, not when you're becoming, what exactly are they holding together? Your spirit or their ego? You deserve more than someone who treats your victories like inconveniences. So the next time they say, "Sorry, I missed it," ask yourself if they were ever planning to arrive, or if your growth is just something they keep forgetting to believe in. You tell them some good news, a project approved, a surprise raise, a dream finally breathing its first breath, and their face shifts, slightly. The smile arrives on time, but it doesn't settle. It hovers, like someone unsure whether they've entered the right room. They say all the right things, but their energy, it stutters. Then they reply, "Wow, that's great," and immediately follow it with, "Guess what happened to me?" Suddenly your moment, your little victory parade, turns into their rerouted spotlight. You blink, nod, pretend not to notice. You're used to it by now. What you've stepped into is a quiet competition, one you never entered, one you never agreed to play. And yet, here you are, always being measured, weighed, matched. Historians still debate whether Mozart and Salieri were true rivals or simply exaggerated by storytelling. But what rings true, whether fact or myth, is the tension that brews when one person's success becomes another person's insecurity. Jealousy doesn't always hiss. Sometimes it claps politely and then plays a louder song. Your joy should be a shared space, a bonfire. But somehow it always turns into a spotlight tug-of-war. You share your light, they cast a shadow. And yet they never outright oppose you. That would be obvious, that would be addressable. Instead they echo. If you hike a hill, they've climbed a mountain. If you write a book, they've launched a business. If you fall in love, they post about choosing themselves. Every win you share becomes a measuring stick they quietly resent. They may never say it, but their eyes do, their energy does. The way they rush to top you or downplay you or distract from you. It's not love, it's ego wrestling in slow motion. There's a psychological term called covert narcissistic competition. It doesn't shout like traditional rivalry. It simmers. It's often masked as support, wrapped in matching excitement. But underneath, there's a desperate need to stay one step ahead. Not to grow with you, but to not be outgrown by you. And here's the strange part. They might not even be aware they're doing it. It's often subconscious, a learned behavior, a deep fear of irrelevance masquerading as confidence. But you feel it. You always feel it. Especially when your good news starts to feel like a mistake you shouldn't have shared. You start shrinking your wins, minimizing your happiness. You say it's not a big deal even when it is, because you know what's coming. The comparison, the shift, the sigh that follows the smile. In ancient Japan, samurai would engage in polite duels of poetry, not swords. Ostensibly friendly competitions, they were actually status battles in disguise. The sharpest verse was not the one that impressed, it was the one that quietly humiliated. Today, we do it through Instagram captions and humble brags. But in close relationships, the damage runs deeper. Because you expect strangers to compete. You don't expect your friend, your sibling, your partner to turn your joy into their scoreboard. Carl Jung once noted that what we deny in ourselves, we often react to most in others. When someone has abandoned their own ambition, your pursuit of purpose will sting. When someone's dimmed their light, your glow becomes blinding. And so, rather than tend to their own fire, they try to extinguish yours. Not openly, not violently, but quietly. a delayed clap, a forced change of subject, a passive-aggressive dig cloaked in concern. It's emotional sleight of hand where your joy disappears without anyone else noticing. You start wondering if you're imagining it. You replay conversations, analyze tone, wonder if maybe you're the one being competitive. That's the trap. Internalizing someone else's insecurity as your own fault. It's like running a race alone, only to find someone following your path, changing your pace, and claiming they were just going for a jog. The saddest part? You might actually care for this person. Deeply. You want them to succeed too. You've cheered for them. You've sat front row at their milestones. You've helped them get back up. But when it's your turn, they're not clapping. They're calculating. Your friendship feels like a mirror you have to wipe clean every time you look into it. Because instead of seeing joy, you see your reflection trapped between loyalty and quiet resentment. One fringe fact: some anthropologists believe that early human tribes avoided praising individuals too much in public to maintain group harmony. High achievement threatened the tribe's balance. So passive competition isn't new, it's ancient. But in modern life, it's more subtle and more lonely. If someone consistently makes your happiness feel heavy, that is not support, it's self-preservation on their part. They're afraid your growth will leave them behind. And maybe, deep down, they know they stopped growing a long time ago. This doesn't make them evil, it makes them insecure. But your job isn't to carry their insecurity. Your job is to protect your peace. You're not selfish for outgrowing people. You're just finally listening to the silence between their words. And that silence, it's where your real answers live. Because no matter how many times they say I'm happy for you, if their joy doesn't echo in their tone, in their timing, in their willingness to stay in your light a little longer, they're not celebrating. They're enduring. And you deserve better than someone who treats your progress like a race they didn't want to lose. They say it softly, always softly, for your own good, to keep you safe, to protect you from disappointment, failure, embarrassment. They never raise their voice. They don't need to. Their concern comes in velvet gloves. You barely feel the grip tightening until you try to stretch. You tell them your ideas and watch their eyes squint just slightly. They tilt their head, a small exhale. Then they speak, not to support, but to nudge you back into place. It sounds like love. It feels like limitation. This might not be the right time. I just don't want you to get hurt. You've always been impulsive. And just like that, your dream takes a step back. Not because you're unsure, but because they are. This is what control looks like in a world too polite to call it by name. It's not screaming orders, it's planting doubt with a smile. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's infamous micromanagement was genius or pure control obsession. But one thing remains clear. Even brilliance becomes suffocating when it tries to command every breath around it. You are not a soldier in someone else's strategy. You are a soul with your own tempo. They never say don't. They say, maybe wait. They never say no. They say, have you thought this through? It's a slower kind of erosion, your confidence rubbed down by repeated friction dressed as logic. The most dangerous cage is the one built out of concern, because you'll thank your captor. You'll admire their wisdom. You'll mistake their doubts for your own. Carl Jung once wrote that people who cannot control their own internal chaos will often seek to control others, because ordering the outside world offers an illusion of inner peace. So they wrap you in caution. They tuck your ambition in with a blanket of fear, and slowly your voice begins to soften. Your steps become tentative. You seek their opinion before your own reflection. At first it feels like support, but it's conditional. It's care that only flows if you shrink yourself to fit their comfort zone. One quirky story. In medieval monasteries, some monks were forbidden from reading certain texts unless supervised. The fear that the ideas might lead them astray. Centuries later, people still try to curate your thoughts in the name of love. They may genuinely believe they're helping you, that they're grounding you. But grounding and caging can look painfully alike. The tragedy is that their advice might even make sense. Sometimes you are unsure, sometimes the risk is high. But the result of their pattern isn't that you grow smarter, it's that you grow smaller. You stop trusting your gut. You stop daydreaming in color. You start second-guessing what used to feel like truth, and it becomes a cycle. You tell them your idea. They gently press down on it. You hesitate. They feel validated. Next time, you hesitate before even telling them. You begin to pre-reject yourself. You seek their approval before you seek your own clarity. You look at your reflection and ask, will they think I'm ready? Control dressed as care doesn't lift you up. It folds you in. It makes you easier to manage. It makes your unpredictability shrink. It makes your spirit polite. Here's the difference. Real love says, even if you fall, I'll be here. Fake love says, you better do it my way or I'm stepping back. They call it concern. But concern that silences you is not love. It's fear with good PR. They tell you stories of failure, not to warn you, but to shape you. They parade their own caution like a badge of honor. But what they don't see is that safety can be its own kind of paralysis. You weren't made to stay inside your comfort zone like a well-behaved dream. And slowly, your mind becomes a courtroom, and they're the jury. Every idea must pass through them. Every decision is prefaced with, do you think I should? And they love it. Not because they're malicious, but because they feel needed. Their grip on you feels like purpose. But love isn't ownership, and care isn't control. You'll know it's happening when you feel more anxious after talking to them. When their words sound sweet but land like stones. When your ambition always leaves the room feeling smaller than when it entered. You'll know because you'll start whispering your ideas. And the moment you start whispering, they've already won. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen the ancient Egyptians used? It seemed helpful at the time, but some remedies are worse than the illness. Some protection comes at too high a cost. You don't need someone who only loves the version of you that fits inside their worldview. You need someone who lets your future surprise them. So ask yourself this, if their care always leads to hesitation, if their concern consistently steals your courage, is it truly care? Because love isn't a leash, and support doesn't shrink you. Your dreams don't need approval, they need oxygen. And if someone's help always ends with you doubting your own voice, maybe it's time to stop asking. Maybe it's time to make decisions that don't need to be defended. Maybe it's time to trust the part of you that dreams loudly and move forward before their silence catches up. They're clapping, sort of. The sound is there, the smile is drawn, the words are kind, but your body doesn't believe it, and neither does theirs. Because the truth, the part you've been trying to ignore, is that their body forgets to lie the way their mouth remembers. You talk about your promotion. They nod, but their eyes wander. You share a personal milestone. They pause too long before responding. You tell a story you're proud of, and their laugh arrives too late, like it missed the bus and decided to jog behind the rest of the group. You're not imagining things. Your nervous system knows when something is off. Carl Jung once said that the unconscious always speaks through the body, and in a world full of noise, the body remains the last honest narrator. When someone secretly resents you, they can rehearse their words, but their limbs will still stiffen. Their shoulders will rise with tension. Their blink rate will shift. Their breath will catch for just a second too long. It's not magic, it's biology. Historians still study whether Queen Elizabeth I's Virgin Queen image was a deliberate political performance or a result of deep-seated personal trauma. Either way, her body spoke volumes. The way she dressed, the way she carried herself, the way she used stillness as power. We all do it. Our bodies reveal our truth, especially when our words are wearing masks. And when someone close to you harbors hidden resentment or envy, their body will leak the signal. You feel it in the room before they even speak. That subtle drop in energy, that coolness behind the warmth, that microscopic pull away, like two magnets just barely misaligned. You try to override it. You tell yourself to stop being paranoid. You rehearse excuses on their behalf. Maybe they're tired, maybe they're stressed, maybe it's just you. But your stomach doesn't buy it. Your chest stays tight. You leave the conversation drained, not energized. That is not what safety feels like. And the most painful part, they may not even be aware they're doing it. But your intuition is. It always is. You know how animals can sense earthquakes before they happen? That's your nervous system when it detects emotional tremors. Your ancestors survived not because they analyzed language, but because they felt shifts, temperature, tone, tension. You've inherited that gift. It's not anxiety, it's awareness. One lesser-known fact, In 19th century Parisian salons, people were trained to notice micro-expressions, those fleeting facial twitches that reveal genuine emotion before the mask slides into place. Today, entire branches of psychology study this, because even the best liars forget to train their cheeks and eyebrows. You remember moments. You remember how their hands fidgeted when you spoke with pride, how they leaned slightly away when you walked into the room, how their hugs felt more like habits than hellos. You remember how their energy dipped every time your spirit rose. That's not love, that's resentment performing politeness. You don't need to wait for a big betrayal. The real wound has already been dealt, dozens of times, small, invisible cuts, the kind that make you question your light, not because it isn't bright, but because someone kept squinting at it. You don't need confrontation. You don't need proof. What you need is peace. And here's the twist. Protecting your peace might look like distance, like fewer messages, like saying less, like letting the silence grow long enough that it tells the truth for both of you. Carl Jung believed that the greatest burden a child can carry is the unlived life of a parent. That applies to friendships too. Many people resent you not because of who you are, but because of who they gave up on becoming. Your success reminds them they stopped trying. Your joy exposes their numbness. Your confidence threatens their control. So they keep you close, but not too close. They act warm, but not too warm. They show up, but leave early. They clap, but only once. If every interaction with them feels like something you have to emotionally recover from, that is not a friendship. It's a performance with bad lighting and a tired lead actor. You. And what happens next is up to you. You could wait for them to change. You could beg for honesty. You could keep editing your light to fit their dimmer settings. Or you could walk, quietly, gently, without fireworks or fury. Just walk. You don't owe anyone your frequency just because they've memorized your rhythm. If your body feels off around them, believe it. If your joy shrinks in their presence, protect it. If you keep searching their face for real celebration and never find it, stop asking. Because real love doesn't flinch at your glow. It basks in it. And as painful as it is, not everyone who walks with you deserves to witness your becoming. Some people clap out of obligation. Others clap because your evolution makes theirs impossible to ignore. But the ones who truly love you, their joy will vibrate through their bones when you win. Their body will lean in, not away. Their eyes will light up, not fade. Their presence won't just look like love, it will feel like home. And now, as you lay back into the softness of this quiet space, let the tension melt from your shoulders. You've seen what hides in the gaps between words, in the stillness behind the smiles, but you've also seen the truth. That your peace is worth protecting, your light worth honoring. Let this be the moment you stop seeking applause from shadows. Let your breath slow, let your thoughts drift. You are safe here. You are enough. The masks can fall away now. All that remains is you, and the freedom to grow without fear.